for the brief introduction, and thanks for this opportunity to share, I think, what's possibly our success story and I think what our passion is. Uh, just give me a minute and I'll be sharing the slides. And I think it'll be great if somebody can just show a thumbs up if when the screen is visible. Yeah. Uh, Ms. Luis, if you can confirm if the screen is visible, then I think I'll just start
Yes,
my presentation.
your screen is visible. Go to presentation mode, please. Excellent. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. I think I'll take the next 5 minutes to brief about what NPCI does, what broadly our structure is, the way we work, possibly what motivates us, what drives us, and then I'll take you through another 5 minutes through the brief history of how UPI has had started, and I think what it is delivering today. And possibly after this, we can have Q&As, if there are some portions which are not getting answered for any one of you. Yeah. I think the objective, the vision, I think that's what's driving us. I think NPCI is building a robust, scalable, and affordable payment infrastructure in the country. And we were driven with the vision to become the best payments network globally. And our mission is to touch every Indian with one or payment services. When we assess ourselves on this mission, and I think we look back at our accomplishment till now, I think we imagine that we're half there. We're at least at 400, 500 million consumers who are using our digital payment product. We would say that we're half there right now, and I think there's another half to be covered very clearly. So this vision and mission is what keeps driving us every day. While we solving for the problems, I think we're using this balanced approach of both. I think being a deep tech company and a deep human company. While a lot of us would know that we're using technology solutions to deliver this digital payments, but I think there is a huge amount of deep consumer insighting, work with the consumers across various segments, understanding their needs, challenges, and then solving for them. And I think this balance between uh, the technology side of things versus the human side of things is what's driving us in a balanced manner. The way we call it, I think, are two passions. One is payments, and one is people. So I think that's the balance that allows us to drive towards this vision and mission. To give you a perspective of India, I think. It's a diverse country. Everyone would have heard about many states in the country. I think the way we look at it, I think every 100 to 150 kilometers, there's a certain nuance changed in the culture, language, clothing, food. They're almost like 22 major languages with 720 dialects. So I think reaching out to such a diverse bunch of people, just communicating to them could be a big challenge. I think there's rapid urbanization, which exploded right from 1990s. Currently at the rate of almost 40-45%, and I think very very rapidly growing. This brings in a very different challenge, from just geographical segmentation of consumers between urban cities and rural areas. It's almost becoming impossible because customers or citizens from the rural areas are coming back to the urban areas. They're living in urban centers, and therefore there's a huge amount of mix because of that. The aspirations of consumers are very very fast and very steep. So I think rapid urbanization is a great enabler, and it brings in the challenge of reaching out to consumers or citizens. The way we look at the segments when we were solving for the problems at citizen scale, I think when we divide the citizens of the country into four clear layers in the pyramid. I think I'll start with the bottom layer. I think with income levels less than $2,000 a year. I think that's similar to, I think, and I'm not saying that that's exactly like that, but I think in our minds we're looking at a consumer segment like Africa. There's like 160 million households in that segment with that kind of income. And I think in our minds, that's like in Africa, to look at, when we're looking at uh, solving for problems of Africa. The second layer looks like Brazil, where there is 2.5 lakh kind of an income yearly, almost 30 million households in that segment. The third layer is almost similar to Indonesia, with 25 million households there, with 2.5 lakh plus of income. And the uh, top of the pyramid looks like Europe for us, with 5 million households, with more than 28 lakhs or $40,000 upwards of yearly income. Now, when you look at the segments this way, no single product no single product portfolio will do justice to it. We need to have a bunch of products which solve for each one of them. That's where it leads to the next the way we imagine solutions. We take solutions to the market. We'll have to solve for it. We have a lot of plus while this happens. There are 1.2 billion Indian citizens connected through the mobile. So I think using these advantages and understanding this diversity, the way we've solved for this very clearly, the bottom layer, we have some products where what we understand is the biometric is the only available tool with the consumer. They can use assisted third-party product like a card or something which can be given to them. The middle layer of consumers are people with feature phones, and the top end of the consumer is somebody who has a smartphone. For each of the segments, we therefore have created a unique product proposition which they can use to solve for their payment needs. So just to take an example, like for the bottom layer, there is Mr. Alok just covered, there are Aadhaar-based payments where they can use a biometric and make a payment, whether it's to a consumer or to a merchant. They can use RuPay. They have ATM as an access. There's a Bharat Bill Pay product where you can make bill payments, reaching out to physical stores close by, mom and pop kirana store, and you can make a payment of your bill. There is IMPS which they can go to a bank branch and make a fund transfer using the bank branch. So I think for each of these layers, if you see, there is a product envisaged. So when we're solving for, I think, our mission statement to reach out to every Indian, we've created a product proposition or a product solution to solve for their payment needs. I think in simplicity, we go calling it, I think, for each of the segments, Asan, which means easy to use, because that's a segment where, literacy levels could be a challenge, and therefore you need to communicate using their strength, which is number literacy, where, they understand signs, they understand the biometric language very easily. The second segment is solutions, which is Samadhan. And the third is really where, we're proud of it, which is the pride segment, which is Abhiman, which is possibly a customer with evolved and aspirational solutions like UPI, IMPS, and etc. How have we been able to do this? I think it would not have happened without coming together of a full ecosystem working for it. Banks, apps, delivery partners in the middle, technology service providers, and more importantly, the regulator and the industry bodies. Very clearly, this is, I would call this the magic portion of the success of the digital payments story in India. Yeah, that's my prelude to stuff. I think what our role is and how we've been able to make digital payments so successful in the country. Moving on to the topic of the discussion, which is UPI. The journey started in 2016 with the launch of UPI. I think that at that point of time, it was a quantum leap in terms of how payments could have been made. I think before this, I think the only method of payment was, you have to give account number and an IFSC to another party to make transfers to you. The use of an LIS like a UPI ID or a virtual payment address to make a payment was the big innovation. In another years time, we reached out to just to give you the context how this flew. In a year's time, we were able to reach to almost 1.68 million transactions a day or 100 million transactions a month. Today, when you look back, I think we're almost at 2022. We're at 4.52 billion transactions in Feb. And that's like a quantum shift jump. I think a huge success in terms of adoption. And thanks to consumers, thanks to the fintechs, banks, regulatory policies, the support by the government, which has allowed for such large-scale citizen-scale adoption of the products. You see through this timelines, we've made a lot of, I think when we launched, it was a simple pay, scan and receive with the only simple functions. We've added in 2019 many other features like one-time mandate, overdraft, app intent. 2020, when we did another big round of additions to the product features with UPI autopay, cross-border payments. So, and I think very recently, last year, we launched something called an e-rupee, which was used during the pandemic to deliver subsidies for vaccinations to the citizens of the country. So I think right from the launch of 2016, we've been driven by a few principles of interoperability, open network, innovation through the fintechs, the last mile solutioning done by fintechs, the scale up of the infra being done by the banks, a very clear policy statement, vision set out by the regulator. So I think that's what been the journey so far. Just to possibly count out, I think, and call out what's been the success. And I think while yes, we get called out as number one for process payments across the world or transactions across the world, and the big principle is 100% interoperability. enabling open banking for all Indians. Really, in that sense, democratizing payments, multilingual capabilities across feature phones, smartphones. So I think it's one solution which has really grown and stood up to solve for the needs of the citizens for payments. I think that's a timeline graph in terms of how the growth has been. I think almost like a hockey stick growth in that sense. This is at the core of what possibly the agenda is for the day. What's been the reason of this success? I think these are the 7 reasons we will call out in terms of what really helped us. It's an interoperable platform. I think we understand what interoperability is, but just to simplify, I think if you want to make as a customer a payment from one app to another app, or from one bank to another bank, you don't really need to have need not be a customer of the same app or the same bank. You can actually, with using UPI, transfer money from one bank to another bank, from one app to another app. So I think that simplicity of picking up any app or any bank app in that sense, transferring money has really simplified the consumers needs of payment transfers. The second one, which is runs on alliances, you don't have to share any of your confidential data or financially sensitive data like account number or IFSC with anyone. You don't have to share an OTP or a PIN with anyone. I think this allows for a lot of this builds a lot of trust when you're moving money from one place to another place. Just the use of the UPI ID, or what's called the virtual payment address, allows you to shift money from a bank account to another bank account. It's real time. I think consumers, merchants, everybody would love to get the credit and the notifications. Their assurance of the funds have come back to their account before they deliver either a service or a goods to another person. So I think that's another third big factor of the success of UPI, real time payments, integrated with multiple servicing channels. I think you can, I think, work on app for yourself. Like there is a bank app. There are third party apps like PhonePe, GPay. There is a common app like Beam. So the customer really has options, right, across all the apps, all the banks available. He can work with any of the banks, any of the apps, and still transact, and the experience is similar across all of them. The only nuance which might change is the user interface for them, but I think the experience largely is standardized across all apps. It's a very collaborative model. I think in the next few slides, I'll share how even we think of features, we think of innovations, how we deploy them in the market. So this really collaborative, engaging model of working with banks, fintechs, guided by the regulator, guided by the government policies, how it really works is actually also the magic part of the success. The last two, I think it really creates an environment of open banking, the agility that the APIs bring to the execution of the and the scalability, and also the agility to make changes to the product. I think the API-driven process really enables the success of UPI. So I think the 7 in our minds, which really stand out or which can be called out for the success of UPI. When we look at from a technology stack, I think it's fully open source built technology. All type of retail payments, merchants can be part of this. Uh, we've started very recently working with cross-border payments, remittances back to India. There's, I think, enough and exhaustive options of attaching funding sources back to this, and I think we'll be looking at taking it ahead as we progress in the future also on this. Direct currency convergence is going to be available on this platform. So I think when you look at options and the scalability of the product, I think it works across the range of needs of both the consumers, the bankers, the regulators, everyone. I think this is just a short summary of how it benefits consumers, merchants, banks. For the consumer, it's available around the clock, 24/7. Uh, no sharing of sensitive data. That's paramount for building trust in the ecosystem. Multiple apps, bank apps, there are third-party apps available. So there is a huge amount of choice available to consumers. It's convenient. It's secured using a single click two-factor authentication. It's a very simple user interface, and across all apps, the user experience is largely standardized. So this allows for consumers to build their expectations and be comfortable, and also helps build consumer awareness around the product. For merchants, they have the functionality of collect. This is like an innovation in payments. Normally the consumer would have to push payments. Here a merchant can actually ask for payments. The merchant can actually send a payment request to a consumer, and the customer can then, if he's availing these goods and services from that merchant, make the payment within the app. Like when you're shopping within an app like an Amazon or a Zomato or a Swiggy, you can actually have an app intent where within the app you can make payments. There is no risk of storing any sensitive data. I think what gets really shared or what do you converse between the apps is actually only payment related data. Also, using aliases very clearly. I think the infrastructure required to get something enabled is very minimal. In fact, it's not very different from the existing other payment systems. In fact, it's more asset light and therefore works from a scalability perspective. There are multiple options available. When you look at from a bank perspective, they can take just by using UPI multiple payment options to the consumer, whether the consumer wants to make a payment to a person or a merchant or a biller. I think it opens up a huge amount of options for banks, and I think it's an asset-light model. You can deploy QR codes to accept payments. In fact, just the UPI ID written on a piece of paper is good enough to accept payments. And as we're progressing, what we've recently launched is something called a UPI number. You can make payments using a mobile number to another consumer or a merchant using just a mobile number. So I think it's really asset light. You don't have to spend a huge amount of money on deploying POS machines. That's a big benefit from when you look at scale that we're looking at in India. For fintechs, I think it's a great ready method. I think while fintechs might be working in various solution areas, the last mile when it comes to really making a payment, and I think given the options that UPI offers, I think it's a great plus for fintechs to really start business and start building their balance sheets. For the consumer side, I think it allows for a lot of customization, a lot of innovation to happen at the last mile. I think this is the governance model, how it really works. I think it starts really from the top with the RBI. The RBI every year, every 3 years, they put out the vision document, which clearly calls out what specific policy measures or focus areas is the regulator going to be focusing on. That gives us enough clarity to have internal deliberations and discussions at the board. Once we have approvals, directions from the RBI and the board, we take those discussions around detailed features, enhancements, understanding consumer insights, possibly going back and reworking the product or the platform. That comes to the steering committee. Banks, non-member banks are part of the steering committees. There is a representation from the industry in the steering committee. There is a representation from the consumer side in the steering committee. This allows for a lot of feedback to come real time in while you're wanting to create a product or a feature. So that really solves for knowing the needs and being in touch with the market, the consumer on almost a regular basis. To solve for very large problems, to solve for complicated challenges, there are multiple working groups working across projects, which has representations from the banks, fintechs, consumer organizations. Therefore, when we come up with a solution, I think there's a large consensus already built while working through the working group and the steering committee. So this really solves for any adoption challenges. This solves for any big surprises coming in terms of the user experience or user designs that we take the product out to the market. While we do this, I think to keep constantly identifying areas of innovation, we have an innovation committee which meets every quarter, where we identify new opportunities, new areas, or new problems to be solved. So I think when you look at this governance model, right from finding problems and challenges by meeting consumers, agreeing with working groups where banks, fintechs collaborate, solve problems, taking it to the steering committee where all the features, products, all the actions are in that sense endorsed, taking it to the board for approval, and then with the regulator for their approvals. This process of governance really is what drives the UPI ecosystem. This is some of the cases you would have seen on a website when you go and want to make a payment, and when you're checking out, you have an option of paying by using UPI. You can scan a QR and make a payment. So I think both those options are available to you. You can enter a UPI ID or you can scan and pay. This is an example of how you can scan a UPI QR, which is visible or available on a biller app. Like Adani is one of our electricity billers here. You can use the UPI ID to make a payment. You can scan the QR and make a payment. In fact, I think we're looking at many use cases like the e-rupee or a prepaid voucher that I just spoke about. It's like a simple QR which gets delivered to a consumer on a phone or an email ID, and the merchant can scan it and process the payment. There is a provision of UPI on feature phones using the USSD channel. *99 hash is how you can access it. Uh, we've recently launched a feature phone based set of solutions where we have an option of an SDK menu option on feature phone. We have a voice based model or even a missed call based model available on the feature phone to use UPI on the feature phone. I think this is it about UPI. I think there's lots of stuff. I think if I were to cover in the limited time that I have, would be doing injustice to the product. I think this is the URL. I think our website is the most informative slash what do you say, transparent in terms of not just information, data points available. So you could go to the website. There is a section called What We Do. Within that, you will find UPI, and I think everything which is related to UPI, which is around product. There are videos, there are circulars. All of them are up on the website for use. Yeah, I will take a pause here, and I would request Miss Lewis to guide.